Over 1 million abortions take place every year in the United States alone. In China, they say it's somewhere around 13 million. When you add up all the figures worldwide, the number is truly staggering. And one of the biggest issues facing humanity is abortion taking the life of a real human being or not? That's the topic that we're going to be exploring next in the abortion controversy. Welcome to part 6 of the series called The Abortion Controversy. 13 programs dealing with a topic that in many circles is just hush-hush. People don't want to talk about it. It's like a skeleton in the closet, but we believe that it is time to bring that skeleton out of the closet, to take a close look at it, and to find out really what is going on. My guest is Antionette. She is the founder of Mafgia Ministry that is really going public with a lot of information. She's telling her story. She has an associate, Dianne Wagner, that is telling her story. And so thank you for joining us, and we're just going to go right in. So, Antionette, here we are again. It's a privilege and a blessing to be here with you, and it's very enlightening to hear the information that you have. Now, I have a quotation here that I'm sure you're familiar with, and this is from the Alan Gutenmacher Institute.
Yes.
Which is a research wing of Planned Parenthood. Yes. According to them, 43.8 million abortions took place in 2008. And according to the World Health Organization, it's somewhere around 45 million worldwide every year.
Yes.
Now, as I mentioned a little bit ago, really one of the biggest issues are these abortions just removing a mass of cells? Is it just a clump of protoplasm? Or are these real human beings that are being aborted? So let's go and let's hear what you have to say.
Sure. At the outset, underlying this issue, I think it's something we need to come to terms with, is that abortion either takes the life of an innocent human being or it doesn't. It can be one or it can be the other, but it cannot be both.
It can't, and there's no neutral. It's either,
there's not a neutral ground.
It's A or B, not C.
That's right. That's right. So the only reason then to oppose abortion, if it does take the life of an innocent human being. If the unborn is not human, there's no reason to oppose it ever. But if the unborn is human, then we have to seriously re-examine our reasons for doing it. Today throughout the program, I'll be referring to various organizations who just have a tremendous amount of experience in this issue. One that I myself have worked with in the past, the name of the organization is called Justice for All.
Do they have a website?
They do. It's www.jfaweb.org.
Okay, and you're pretty familiar with this organization.
Yes. I was able to work with them back in 2005. Their approach is very different from the Mafgias. Because they do use graphic images in seeking to reach people. Very briefly, their reason for doing that, for using the graphic images, is they rely on the underlying principle of the story of Emmett Till. In that story, there was an African American boy. It was back prior to the Civil Rights Movement. He was from Chicago. And he had family down in Mississippi. He really wanted to go down and visit his cousins. His mother, before he left, she really tried to emphasize to him, you need to understand, black doesn't touch white. You have to show the utmost deference and respect to Caucasian people. You don't touch them. You don't look them in the eye. And he said, I know, Mom, I'm ready to go. Let me go. So she lets him go down. He visits his cousins. While he's down there, it is believed that he started bragging to his cousins and saying, you know what, I don't just go to school with white girls, I also have 2 white girl friends. And his cousins said, well, you think, you're so wonderful with the white girls, why don't you go into that store and say hello to the sales clerk? who was a white woman.
So they were just goading him on, just
yes.
daring him.
Yes, but not understanding maybe how dangerous the situation
It's
they
a lot
were.
different than Los Angeles, where I grew up.
Yes, yes. Well, he goes in, he ends up buying a pack of bubble gum. As he's leaving the store, he supposedly turned around to the woman and said, "Bye, baby," and runs off the porch. There were two African-American men who were sitting on the porch, and they said, "Boy, you better get out of here because they're going to kill you." And at 2 a.m. the next morning, Emmett Till was extracted from gunpoint, by gunpoint from his uncle's house. And the next time anyone saw him, his face literally did not look human. What they did to him so completely marred and disfigured him that he just didn't look human any longer.
And he was, I'm assuming he was dead at that point.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
totally. His mother, the coroner put his body in a casket, sealed it up, shipped it back to Chicago, and his mother decided, I'm going to have an open casket funeral. And when that happened, people said, "Miss Till, don't you understand how disturbing this will be to people? His face has been so disfigured." And she said, "I want the whole world to see what they did to my boy." Jet Magazine ended up being present at the funeral. They took a photo and published it in their magazine. And later, when Rosa Parks refused to go to the back of the bus, she cited Emmett Till's photo as part of her motivation. And sociologists say that that was so pivotal, people being able to see. But what I really appreciate about the training at JFA, they ask, was Emmett Till the first child who was ever killed or murdered in the South? No. Was he the last child who was ever murdered in the South? Very likely not. And yet, what was the difference? That people could see it. It
Sure.
now had a face.
It's the classic statement, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And
Absolutely.
I think I've shared this with you before, but when you talk about the pictures, I just want to share something that when I first learned about you and your associate, Dianne, I mentioned this before, I was in a hotel in Oregon. I heard your testimony on my phone, and I was so just struck by it that I decided we needed to bring you here. We needed to go forward and do a series like this. And anyway, that I believe it was a Saturday night. That night, I decided to do some more research on abortion, and I went onto YouTube and I found a video that was very graphic. And when I was done watching that program,
Yes.
I literally was crying. I got on top of my bed, I knelt down and I prayed something like this. I just said, "God," I said, "I don't even want to be part of the human race anymore. I am just so shocked that this can actually be happening. You know, it's just like, get me off of this planet right now."
Wow.
I was so ashamed. I was so embarrassed, even though I wasn't involved. And I was just horrified. And I'm sure you would probably agree that, you know, we shouldn't be putting these images in front of everybody all the time. But there is a place
Yes.
for the reality to
Yes.
hit us of what's really going on.
Yes, and that's what I really appreciate about their approach, that there is a place, and it's something that does bring back to the forefront of our understanding what is really going on.
Now, are they Christian, non-Christian, or
They
mixture
are.
of
They
both?
are.
Or?
Yes, they're a Christian organization, multi-denominational.
Okay.
And even though the Mafgia's approach is different, we've really focused on healing, the sanctity, the intrinsic value of the human being, and healing for people who are post-abortive. And we don't choose to use graphic images, but there certainly is a place. And I have truly appreciated the training and the just wisdom and understanding that I've received in working with them. And so we'll be using some of that as we go throughout the course of the
Okay,
program.
so tell me a little more about them. You told me that you've been to some of their meetings. What are they doing? How are they trying to reach out?
They primarily work on college campuses, taking different images, asking questions, really trying to get, they focus on the 18 to 24-year-old demographic, and they're really attempting to get the conversation started, particularly at that level. The majority of abortions take place, over 1 million in the United States every year.
During that age group.
They take place between 18 and 24 years old, which makes sense. You have a lot of single people,
Right.
College age, you're making a whole lot of choices that perhaps you didn't have the opportunity to make before. And they're really focused on reaching the group that truly is
Having the most
experiencing
abortions.
this. Yes, the most.
Okay, so on these college campuses, when they share pictures, and information, what kind of response do they get?
The response is tremendous. You have it really sort of runs the gamut. Some people are very angry. Some people quite don't know what to think. But with their approach, because they're operating normally in a secular environment, they're not using scripture necessarily to make the case. They're using reasoning. They're using philosophy, and hoping for those avenues to open up where they will be able to share about the Lord and the gospel. And they have had many opportunities to do that, to say that's why ultimately we are valuable, because we're made in the image of the Lord. Their approach has been phenomenal. I've watched mind after mind after mind be changed as people were presented with simple truth about the unborn being alive, about the unborn being human, about the way that the unborn develops, and watched as people just thoughtfully considered their position. And so many people have said
They've switched.
They have.
They've changed their minds.
They really have.
Yeah, and there's some powerful YouTube videos out there that they show you graphically about, they show you the little sperms and then the egg and then they come together and then there's a new cell, and it just walks you right through the miracle of life. And it's amazing.
Well, and what has been so critical about their approach is they base it on the idea of when Jesus was in the temple, he listened and he asked questions. And that's really how they walk through every conversation. They ask questions and they're listening. And they're listening really for what the other person is really trying to say. Because if someone is angry and talking about this, where is that anger coming from? Why is someone angry? If someone is confused, what are they confused about? They really do want to affect. It's not just a matter of being right or saying I brought someone over to my side, but genuinely reaching the deep,
reach the
core,
right,
to transform thinking.
So it's like the light goes on in their eyes.
Absolutely.
Now, in the last segment, we talked about the biblical evidence. Now, let's zero in on, you mentioned the scientific evidence.
Yes.
The kind of information that they present to the college students.
Yes.
What is that evidence?
Yes. Well, as Greg Kokel with a different organization, Stand to Reason, has said, before we can kill any living thing, we have to first determine what it is. He gives a wonderful example of, say you were washing dishes at your kitchen sink, and your son or daughter comes up behind you, so your back is to them, and you just hear, hey, Dad, can I kill this? What's the first question that's going to come out of your mouth? Exactly.
Right.
What are you trying to kill?
Yeah,
what is it?
Is it a stink bug, or we have a number of spiders
Absolutely.
in our house? We live in the country, so right. What is it?
Yeah. What is it?
It's not our cat or our dog they're talking about.
Right. Because it's a bug, you're going to have one question. If it's the cat, you're going to have one response.
Yeah. My daughter wants to take the bugs outside. She doesn't even want to kill them in the house. She's such a compassionate little girl.
Right. But the cat, you would say, wait a minute, honey, we can't kill the cat.
Of course.
If your brother had his, or if your son had his little sister, you would stage an intervention. Of course, we can't get rid of your little sister.
Of course.
And so it's very critical that we first determine what it is that we're trying to take the life of before we actually take its life. The definition for life scientifically involves three characteristics: irritability, metabolism, and cellular reproduction. Irritability is reaction to stimuli. Metabolism is converting food to energy, and cellular reproduction is growth. The unborn exhibits all three characteristics. Steve Wagner, who is the director of Justice for All now, has created this wonderful tool, which is in essence a 10-second human defense for the humanity of the unborn. I think it's very helpful, and this is sort of my version of it. If the unborn is growing, it must be alive. If the unborn has human parents, it must be human.
Makes
and
sense.
Living humans, or human beings like you and me, are valuable, aren't they?
And they make other human beings.
And they make other human
Right.
beings, because the law of biogenesis tells us that like begets like. So dogs give birth to dogs, cats give birth to cats, humans give birth to humans.
Sounds pretty simple.
It is simple.
It's really simple, isn't it?
It is. Faith like a child. It's that simple. The Lord has laid it out very simply. And it's really amazing when you get into dialogue with people, and if someone makes the claim, the unborn isn't really human, but what is it?
Yeah, then what is it, right?
Because we've come from humans. Scientifically, we know we can't reproduce something that isn't after our own kind. We're going to reproduce after our own kind. And so from the very beginning, the unborn is alive. Scientifically, it meets those characteristics of things that are alive. And it is a human being that is alive in the womb.
Isn't it? I've read recently an illustration, like, think of seeds. If you think of a wheat seed, it's a wheat seed, it's in the ground, then it starts to grow. It's not up above the ground yet. It's not, analogous to a baby coming out of the body, but it's still under the ground, but it's growing, and at whatever stage of development, it's still a little wheat plant.
Yes.
It's a wheat plant.
Right.
And then once it breaks ground, and then it comes up, and then you've got the full, eventually the full, group of wheat seeds.
Yes.
But it's a wheat plant all the way through.
Yes.
To me, it's simple, it makes sense.
Yes.
I get it.
Yes. Yes. Well, and so what we know then is we know the unborn is human. We know the unborn is alive. And from conception, from the very beginning, you have a unique, genetically distinct human organism that has come into existence.
That's separate from the, she's
separate from the mother.
It's dependent upon the mother,
Yes.
but it is separate. It's not the mother.
Yes. There's this, Scott Klusendorf with the Life Training Institute uses the example of parts versus wholes. You have a human sperm and a human ovum, egg, that come together and they unite. But when they fertilize, when they come together, they cease to exist separately and they form a new, unique, genetically distinct human organism. There is no more human sperm, there is no more human egg. It's simply a zygote, which incidentally means to come together. It is a coming together. And that is what the unborn is from the very beginning. From the moment of conception, every bit of genetic information that you have sitting here now, you had then. In essence, you possessed everything genetically. Way back then, you simply were at a different stage of development.
So you're saying, but it was still, when it was me back then, in my mother, Sandy Wohlberg, that's my mom's name, she's still alive, she lives in Palm Springs, California, then it was still me.
Yes.
But I've been growing for quite a bit, and
Yes.
now I've got gray hair, and things are changing, and
Yes.
you'll find that out later. but you get the point.
Yes.
The point. The point is that when the sperm and the egg came together, it was me.
Yes.
Even though I was undeveloped.
Yes, yes, yes. And nothing is added to you to make you any more human. There's this, if you think of Richard Stith, was a philosopher who came up with this example of the Polaroid picture. Do you remember Polaroid pictures? You take them and you snap the picture and the photo pops out.
Yes, I remember that. Now we just use the phones.
Right. Yes. Yes. But actually, I think they've become popular again. The idea of Polaroid picture. I know they were bigger back in the 80s, maybe. When you take a Polaroid picture, you take it and it pops out. But when you look at it, it's pretty gray and smudgy. You don't actually see the photo that you just took. You have to give it time to develop. But the fact that you can't see everything that is there doesn't mean that photo isn't there. Nothing is added to the picture to make it any more of a picture. It simply needs time so that your eyes and my eyes can actually see it.
And the development process. Now, didn't you mention you had just some quick facts about conception and then the first week and then at what point the heart starts beating and
Yes.
some of those little intricate details which are significant?
Yes, yes. When the unborn, the child in utero is 3 weeks, you have a heartbeat. And at that point, the child is the size of a grain of rice. At
Wow.
6 weeks, the child has brain waves. At 7 weeks, there are eyelids. Toes are forming. The nose is distinct. The baby is kicking and swimming. At 8 weeks, every organ is in place and bones begin to replace cartilage. Fingerprints begin to form, and at 8 weeks, the child begins to hear. At 10 weeks, teeth begin to form, fingernails develop. The child can turn his head and frown. The baby can hiccup.
Wow.
Yes, at weeks 10 and 11, the baby can breathe amniotic fluid and can urinate. At week 11, the baby can grasp objects in its hand. The baby has a skeletal structure.
So it has little hands by that time to grab something.
Well, long before that, but it can actually grab onto things
Wow.
at week 11. It has skeletal structure and nerves and circulation. At week 12, so this is about 3 months, the baby has all the parts that are necessary to experience pain, including nerves, spinal cord, and the vocal cords are complete. The baby can suck its thumb.
Wow. So when John the Baptist was in Elizabeth, and Elizabeth met Mary, and the Bible says in the book of Luke that the babe leaped in her womb. And I keep thinking of that last little part. It says, for joy.
Yes.
So there's joy, there's emotion going
Yes.
on.
Yes.
And he, that child, it was John in there, just little John.
Yes. Yes, yeah. At 14 weeks, the heart pumps several quarts of blood through the body a day. At 15 weeks, the baby has adult taste buds. Bone marrow at into the 16th week, month 4, bone marrow is beginning to form. The heart is pumping 25 quarts of blood a day. At week 17, the baby can dream, REM sleep. At week 19, babies can routinely be saved from 21 to 22 weeks after fertilization. At week 20, babies can recognize their mother's voices. In the 5th and 6th month, the baby will practice breathing by inhaling amniotic fluid into its lungs. It can grasp the umbilical cord. Mothers can normally feel all the kicking and movement. In months 7 and 8, the baby can open and close its eyes. It's using it's using 4 of its senses. He knows the difference between waking and sleeping. He can relate to the moods of his mother.
Wow.
It's absolutely phenomenal, the stages of development, how developed the child is so early on.
It reminds me of the verse we read previously in Psalm 139 where David says, you wove me together in my mother's womb.
Yes.
I can't help but tell a quick story. When Seth was born, he came flying out of my wife. I was there in the operating room. She had a C-section because she was having some complications. So the doctor pushed down, the baby came flying out. Seth was just screaming and howling, hollering, did I say that right? Yelling like crazy. And they laid his bloody little body right next to me on a table. And I looked at him and he was screaming and I said, Seth, it's your daddy. And as soon as I said that, he stopped crying right away.
Wow.
And he put his 2 little fingers on his lips and he went like this. And because he knew my voice and he was looking for daddy.
Wow.
Now, the reason why he knew my voice was because I had been talking to him before he came out
Yes.
for a long time.
Yes.
And when he finally came out, it was him because he knew my voice and it was him all the way. And I'll never forget that. I've got a little picture of it. And
Wow, that's powerful. That really
it
is.
changed my life.
Yeah.
Changed my life.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with that kid and I still love him today.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and in talking about development, in addition to what Stith, this idea of the Polaroid picture, it's important to understand that we're not constructed, that parts aren't added to us to make us any more human, and that it's not like you go down an assembly line on like with the car, where you add tires and a wheel, and eventually you have a human being. We literally develop from within
Great
ourselves.
illustration.
Right? Yeah, not mine, Richard Stith, but
Wonderful.
fantastic. Now, something that's really important to understand, because I know we're running out of time, is someone might say, okay, I understand that the unborn, okay, I'll give you that the unborn is human, but the unborn isn't really a person. And philosopher Stephen Schwartz came up with 4 really critical distinctions that separate or that distinguish us from the unborn. They are size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. And you can think of the acronym SLED to remember them. In essence, people will say the unborn size is different, the level of development is different, they're more dependent on the mother, the environment is different, and so they're not really human. And if we think about that, it's true that the unborn is smaller, but can't we think of other human beings out here in the world like a newborn or a toddler who's smaller than a 5-year-old or a teenager, but does that make the newborn less valuable simply because it's smaller? You think of level of development. It's true that the unborn is less developed, but it's at the right stage of development for where it's supposed to be inside the mother's womb. And you think about us, again, a toddler or a 5-year-old is less developed than you or I, but does that mean that the toddler is less valuable?
Or less human.
Simply because they're less developed, the level of development is different. In the environment, you gave an illustration earlier where you moved from one room to another, but you did not lose or gain value based on that movement. Just because the unborn goes from inside the womb to outside of the womb, does that change of environment really dictate the value of that child? And for the last degree of dependency, it's true that the unborn is very dependent, but you consider how dependent a newborn is on its mother. And we can think of many illustrations of where someone out here in the real world is very dependent.
And we're all dependent upon God.
We are very dependent upon God.
If He wasn't beating our hearts, and we couldn't breathe, our brain cells couldn't work, and all the electrical impulses and the blood flowing throughout the body, we are absolutely dependent upon God every moment of our lives in order to live.
Right, absolutely. And so we see then that these four differences that people commonly refer back to when they're talking about the value of the unborn, that in actuality, they're not relevant in determining moral value. That we, at fertilization, at our very beginning, we were what we are. We were then what we are now. We were simply at
A different stage.
different size, different level of development in a different environment at a different degree of dependency.
Right. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me that, when Seth and Abby came out of my wife, 1 week old, let's say, they're human, they're valuable. Go back 3 weeks before, and they're still them.
Right.
It's still Seth, it's still Abby, it was still me, it was still you.
Right.
It just makes perfect sense.
Right, absolutely. And so for us, it's about being honest about this idea. We're either taking the life of an innocent human being or we're not. Again, it can be one, it can be the other, but it can't be both. And so when we're making distinctions, saying these abortions should be permissible or these abortions should not be, we really have to come back to that central point.
I got it. Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. I want to finish this segment, this program, with a couple of quick verses in the book of Job, chapter 10, verse 8 and verse 12. Job said to God, "Your hands have made me, and you have fashioned me. An intricate unity. You have granted me life." You've granted me life. And God has given us life ever since the very beginning when the conception took place. And He's been with us all of our lives. He's been with us every step of the way, and He'll continue to be with us. And as Antionette mentioned, the big issue when it comes to abortion is it really taking the life of an innocent human being or not? We believe it is, but we also believe that there is a God in heaven who loves us, even if we've done wrong, and that His love, His forgiveness, and His healing power is available to you and to me right now. So let's get to know that God, and may His love change our hearts.
Dianne Wagner and Antionette Duck share powerful, life-changing information in this 13-part series, The Abortion Controversy. To order this 6.5-hour DVD set for only $34.95, call 1-800-782-4253. That's 1-800-782-4253. Or you can write to White Horse Media, P.O. Box 1139, Newport, Washington 99156, or order online at whitehorsemedia.com.